I'm Marianne Lippa. I'm one of the advisors on the graduate student and postdoc team here in Penn Career Services. And what we will cover today is the virtual and in-person design career fairs that are coming up, the action items, what you can do now to prepare for those, day of tips, how to maximize your experience. What do you do to make the most out of career fairs? How do you maximize that? And we will also talk about the resume books, which are available and open now for you to upload your resume. So we have two design career fairs in February. We have both an in-person fair as well as a virtual fair. When you go on to Handshake, you can register for the in-person fair. It is open. It is on Thursday, February 6th at 12 o'clock. It's from 12 to 4 p.m. in Houston Hall. And then on Wednesday, February 12th, we will have a virtual career fair, and that begins at 12 o'clock p.m. on Wednesday, February 12th. Registration for the virtual fair will open in 14 days from now. On February 4th at 12 o'clock noon, you can sign up for group sessions and one-on-one sessions with employers for the virtual fair. For the in-person fair, you would just come to Houston Hall and you will be able to meet with the employers who are in attendance. So as I mentioned, the in-person career fair is coming up on Thursday, February 6th. We have it from 12 to 4 p.m. What you can do now to participate is register on Handshake and make sure that when you arrive in person to Houston Hall for the fair, you have your Penn card so that we can sign you in. You have copies of your resumes if you'd like to bring that with you. You also have prepared a verbal introduction about who you are, your experiences, your interests. We often will refer to that as your elevator pitch. And then also be prepared for questions that you would like to ask the employers. So what are you interested in learning more about that particular firm or organization? And what are you interested in learning more about the different opportunities they might have for both internship and full-time opportunities? Now, for the virtual fair on Wednesday, February 12th, there are a few things that you do need to do in advance of the fair. First and foremost, you must register on Handshake starting on February 4th when it opens to sign up for the group sessions and one-on-one sessions. That will be your only way to speak with employers at the virtual fair is if you sign up for those virtual sessions on Handshake. You also want to make sure that you upload your resume to Handshake and make it public along with your profile. This is going to be really important so that they have access to that while you are in those sessions. You also want to make sure that similar to the in-person fair, you're giving an introduction about yourself, your experiences and interests during those one-on-one sessions. A group session may range from just a few people to maybe 30 to 50 people. So it wouldn't necessarily lend itself to that one-on-one conversation, but for the individual one-on-one sessions, you absolutely will have that opportunity to introduce yourself and also to share a little bit more about your interests and experiences. In addition, you'll want to bring questions for the employers, just as you would have for the in-person fair the week prior. So as I mentioned, we have the two formats for the career fair. We have the traditional career fair, which takes place in person, where you're able to come up to the table where the representatives are, introduce yourself, ask them questions, learn about the different opportunities. And then we also have the venue that we call the virtual career fair. And so that enables you to meet with an employer in front of the video. You're able to meet with them one-on-one or potentially in a group setting. And so both of these are ways that you're able to have connections with employers, learn more about the different opportunities, and share information about yourself. So you want to think about, what are ways that you can best prepare for both formats, right? Because there will be firms and organizations that are coming to just the in-person fair or just the virtual fair. There may be some that do both, but in general, they typically just choose one of those types of formats. So it's really important to make sure that you're able to participate in not just the in-person fair, but also the virtual fair as well. So what are some best practices for in-person, right? So what is some of the pre-work that you can do? The first is making sure that you have a general resume as well as a targeted resume to bring with you. And by general, we mean one that can be kind of applicable, right? So if you're interested in different opportunities across different industries within the design fields, you may want to have a more general resume, right? If you are specifically targeting just a certain field within architecture, within city planning, within historic preservation, then you may want it to be much more targeted and more specific. You also want to take a look at who are the employers that are going to be participating in the career fair. You can take a look at that list beforehand on Handshake. We still have registration open for both fairs, but there are over 60 employers right now registered for the in-person fair. So you're able to take a look at that. And you're also able to see who are the virtual employers that have signed up. Again, you won't be able to register yet for the virtual fair, but you can at least see who has so far signed up for the virtual fair. You can also on Handshake look and see what internship opportunities and full-time jobs that may also be posted at this point. And so that's really helpful too, so that you have a little bit more knowledge and foundation to kind of walk into that room when you're getting ready to speak with some of the employers. You also want to make sure that you're doing some research into the organization itself, right? So do some homework. Go onto the websites for these different firms, organizations, employers. Take a look at who they are. What are some of the projects that maybe they've highlighted? What are some of the key things that they talk about? That's going to be really important so that when you do speak with the employers, you have much more background knowledge and information. You also want to think about what are some of the questions that you may want to ask them, right? So generate the questions, think about which ones are going to be important for you to ask. You also want to make sure that you're uploading your resume to the resume book. So on our website, we have a link to the various resume books that are organized by interested career field, as well as full-time opportunities and internship opportunities. So you can upload your resume in multiple places for the ones that you want to include your resume for. The resume books will be made available to the employers participating in the career fairs the week prior to the fair. So definitely make sure that if this is something that you want to have your resume included for, you have that in advance of the deadline, and we will talk about that in a few slides. You also want to take a look at the map. So we will be providing a map ahead of time. So you just want to be strategic about, where do you want to maybe go first in that room, right, for the in-person fair? Where do you maybe want to make sure that you speak, in a particular order? I want to go to this firm, then I maybe want to go to this employer. It just really helps you kind of have that strategy and that plan. And we really ask that you make sure you allow yourself enough time to see all the employers that you want to see and speak with. The fair does end promptly at 4 o'clock. So it doesn't make sense to show up at 3:45 if you have, a lot of employers that you want to see, because at that point they're starting to pack up, and so that they can head out right at 4 o'clock if they need to catch a train or a flight, and some of those other prior obligations that they may have to be out promptly at 4. In terms of arriving and greeting employers for the in-person fair, it's important to remember that it is optional to wear a mask. If you feel more comfortable with one, you can. It's not required. Shaking hands is also optional. Make sure that you do smile, right? So having, kind of a positive energy that you bring when you speak with the employers is really important. You also want to make sure that you have that 30-second intro prepared, right? That elevator pitch, describing who you are, what's some of the related experience that you bring, what do you happen to know about the position or the company that you're going to be speaking with. And again, it's important to convey enthusiasm and interest, right? You also want to make sure that you ask questions, right? It's going to be really important to not only share information about yourself, but to also gather information, right? And to learn. So one of the things that you can think about is, asking them, can you share more information about what type of candidate they might be looking for? What are the skills that they would like to see, right, in that candidate? That is a much better question than just saying, so what do you do at this firm, right? That's just not a well-prepared, well-thought-out question. So you want to make sure that it's very carefully phrased and it's well thought. So to kind of summarize some of the best practices for in-person, again, making sure you're bringing enthusiasm, energy, questions, do your homework in terms of the company, in terms of the opportunities. And then it's also important to think about, how am I going to follow up with these firms, right? So one of the things you want to do when you're speaking with them is thinking about, okay, if I'm really interested in applying for this position, or they may say to you, well, we don't have anything posted yet, but we will in the next few weeks. Be sure to check our website out. It's also thinking about, how do I follow up? How do I continue this conversation right after the career fair? So you want to continue to reiterate your interest and think about proposed next steps, right? So maybe ask them the best way to stay in contact through the process. They may already volunteer that information to you and share that, or that it might be something that you need to ask them. So you'll kind of get a sense, when you're in the conversation with the representative, what would be the next step, right? Is it something that you need to ask, or is it something that they're just going to share with you? You also want to think about, when possible, sending a brief thank you email. If you would like to thank them in an email following the career fair for their time and to, having learned about specific opportunities and more about the firm, that's always a really nice way to kind of continue to stay in touch. And then you also want to think about, okay, leveraging that information that you have now gained and learned and acquired from the career fair conversation into your next resume, right? So thinking about, what are some of the skills that maybe were emphasized in that conversation? Are you then reflecting that accordingly in your resume where you've demonstrated X, Y, and Z skills? You also want to think about, how do you maybe incorporate that into the interview if you're invited to interview after applying for the position? So now let's talk about the virtual career fair. How does the virtual career fair work? Well, the most important step to prepare for the virtual fair is to make sure you register for the fair before the day of the fair. So that means not on February 5th, not on February 6th, but to actually do that on February 4th, when registration opens at 12 o'clock noon Eastern Standard Time. The reason it's important to register when it opens on February 4th is because some of the sessions do fill up. It's not an unlimited number of sessions for the one-on-ones. So, group sessions are allocated for 30 minutes and one-on-one sessions are allocated for 15 minutes. And there are only so many slots for those sessions. So it's really important, when the registration opens, that you're able to go on Handshake and sign up for those sessions that are of interest to you. Scheduling a one-on-one or a group session is the only way to talk with the employers. So if you are not signed up for a session, it won't enable you to participate in the virtual fair. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that if you wish to speak with an employer and a particular firm, the way to do that through the virtual fair is to sign up either as a group session or also as a one-on-one session. Some of the, advantages, if you will, about what a virtual career fair can bring, or the perks, is that you don't have to stand in line, right? It's a specific time that you are given, that you've chosen to speak with the employer, right? So you can schedule that in advance. That's very helpful, right? It also enables you to adequately prepare and research the employers. The one-on-one sessions are scheduled with a specific person. And so it's sometimes when you go to an in-person fair, there might be 2 or 3 representatives there, but at least for the virtual fair, you're able to know who you'll be meeting with. You don't have any distractions. It's, we call it introvert friendly, right? It's really important to think about, how a virtual fair might be more conducive to those that might tend to be a little bit more introverted, right? The virtual fair kind of really helps students be a little bit more comfortable in speaking with employers. There aren't as many distractions in the room, as crowded, it's not as loud. The group info sessions for the employers do allow for some Q&A from students. And that is great too, because you're able to hear what some other students might be interested in learning about, right? Or some of their questions. And so it might be something that you hadn't thought of. So that can be really helpful too with the group sessions. And lastly, you don't have to worry about holding your coat, having a bag, having a notebook in front of you, because it's all right there on the screen. So the virtual fair also has some really great advantages as well. So as I mentioned, the virtual fair for 2025 the registration opens on February 4th at 12 o'clock p.m. The virtual fair itself is the following week, which is Wednesday, February 12th. So keeping in mind that you're signing up the week prior to participate in the virtual fair. Some things that are going to be really important for you to do when you sign up on Handshake for the virtual fair is to make sure that you have your Handshake profile updated. This is really critical and important because this is what's going to enable you to then sign up for the sessions, right? So 2 particular sections that you want to pay close attention to is when you go onto your Handshake platform, you'll see on the right-hand side where the arrow is, you'll see a drop-down menu where your initials appear that'll specifically list profile as well as settings. So those are two of the sections that you want to pay close attention to. So under your profile, you're able to edit the information that you want to make sure is accurate and correct. So you want to check all the basics, right? So is your graduation date listed? Is your school year listed? Your major, you can also list your GPA if you'd like. So these are just some screenshots showing you what you can expect to see. Now, while you're on this page, it's going to be really important to also update your interests. So that can include the job types, perhaps geographic locations, some of the roles, and some of the career fields and industries that are of interest to you. Now, you'll also want to then go to the settings section. And this is where you'll see school year listed. You can see gender and pronouns also listed. You also want to continue to check under the privacy section. Do you want it to be listed as community? And because if you list it as private, none of the employers are going to be able to see your profile. So you want to make sure that it's listed as community. You also want to answer the questions about work authorization as well. And then at the very bottom, make sure you click Save Updates. It's going to be important to make sure you click on that green button. Then the next step is to upload your resume. So you would upload your resume under the My Documents section. So again, going back to where your initials appear on the screen, you'll see in the drop-down menu where it says My Documents. Then you'll go over where it says, if you don't already have your current resume uploaded, it'll then say Select from Computer. And you can either upload a PDF version or a Word version. Then once registration opens for the virtual fair at 12 noon on February 4th, you can register for one-on-one and group sessions. So what you'll look for is where it says available sessions at the top, your schedule, career fair details. You'll see under available sessions, what is available. It'll then list the name of the employer. It'll have a brief company profile description, and then it'll allow you to select, if it's still available, the group sessions and the one-on-one sessions. When you then click on a one-on-one session option, it will then tell you what times are still available. Those are the ones that will only be listed. So you have 4 times you can choose, for example, here, and then you can confirm it at the bottom. There is no limit on the number of one-on-one sessions that you can select. So if you plan to meet with 10 different employers and you want to have 10 one-on-one sessions, that's perfectly fine. The thing that you have to keep in mind, though, is that the sessions can't overlap. And so that's going to be something you do need to make sure and stay organized about. You can't have overlapping sessions. So the group session registration. So the reason that we are showing an example from a previous career fair we've done is because registration is not yet open. So we can't walk you through how to sign up specifically for the firms that have already registered because they haven't yet finished setting up their own sessions. But this is just what it would look like. So instead of saying the Biosciences and Research Career Fair, it will then say the Design Fair for you, and then it'll have the names of the companies listed. You'll see on the right-hand side what they offer. You'll see the group sessions in the same place. And typically they do end in those 30 minutes with a Q&A session incorporated into that 30-minute session, so you can then ask questions directly to the employer. So therefore, we do recommend that you stay for the entire session. Some best practices for the virtual career fair: make sure that you avoid scheduling back-to-back sessions, right? So you do want to have a little bit of a breather room if you need to, kind of just gather your thoughts, maybe, drink some water, use the restroom, whatever it might be. You just want to make sure you're not doing them all consecutive back to back. You do want to consider attending some group sessions as well, simply because it may be a firm or employer or organization that you don't know as much about, but you might want to learn more about it. And then you can get a sense of what are some of those opportunities. So we really encourage you to be as open-minded as possible. You can continue to check on Handshake for any additional availability. So some of the firms that may fill up on sessions may decide if they can to add additional sessions. And if that's the case, continue to check Handshake. By continuing to check Handshake, it would enable you to see if there are any additional sessions that are added. You want to make sure that you have identified an appropriate space to conduct your participation in the virtual career fair, right? So you want to make sure that it's quiet, you don't have distractions, it has good lighting, it's a suitable background. And also we encourage you to dress in semi-professional attire. So during the one-on-one sessions, you absolutely want to make sure that you are punctual and that you are on time. You can enter the video sessions 5 minutes early. They just may not necessarily, it's sort of similar to like a Zoom waiting room. They may not necessarily be able to let you in until they finish up with their previous student, but you can at least be in the queue waiting. You want to make sure you introduce yourself, smile, ask thoughtful, informed questions. You can take notes on your conversation and also the name of the person with whom you're speaking. Definitely inquire about next steps. You can ask them for a follow-up email address and make sure you're mindful of your time, right? You want to make sure you leave time in those 15-minute sessions to wrap up, right? So thinking about, you don't want to be talking for 14 minutes and have only like 1 minute of questions. You want to make sure that there is an appropriate amount of time for you to kind of wrap up and end the conversation and not feel rushed. So some technical considerations to keep in mind for the virtual career fair. You want to make sure that you're joining it with a preferred browser. So the recommendation from the Handshake platform is to use Chrome and Firefox. Those are the recommendations. Safari is not recommended. You can do a network test to just make sure that it is fully functional for you with the web browser, the preferred web browser that you're using. You do want to make sure that you have a link to your resume ready for the one-on-one sessions. Employers can see your public resume from Handshake, but if you have a more specific or tailored version that you want to share, you can have a Google file or link or a Box document. That would be really helpful as well. After you attend the virtual fair, employers will have access to your resume when they download a list of participants from their sessions. But again, that might just be the more general one that you've uploaded as opposed to a more specific one. So that's why it's helpful to be prepared with both. You do want to be mindful and aware of what are the sound settings when you join a meeting. So make sure that you're muted for group sessions, but that you're unmuted for the one-on-one sessions. There are some Handshake resources that are very helpful to read through in preparation for the virtual career fair. I've included some of those links here. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, when we send out the recording, there will be a QR code on the slide deck. And you can also scan the QR code when we get to the slide at the end of this presentation. So some action steps to remember moving forward. Make sure you check that registration open date and mark your calendar. So February 4th, 12 p.m. noon. Update your profile on Handshake. Make your profile visible to employers is very important. So you want to make sure you don't just have your profile, but that you also have made it visible to the employers. Update your resume, create a shareable link. Make sure you've decided where you will be conducting these sessions. So figure out the quiet professional space with good internet connectivity to attend the fair virtually. Select your attire for the fair. We recommend semi-professional attire. And then in addition to the recommendation for the in-person fair, make sure that you're also reviewing and researching the list of employers who have registered for the virtual fair. So you might be asking yourself, well, how is a career fair helpful? Well, there's some aspects about career fairs that are really important as you explore different opportunities, as you move forward in your job search. One thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to be looking specifically yet for a job or internship to benefit from a career fair, right? So maybe this is, you're in your first year of the program and you're just trying to get a sense of what are some of the things that will be available, or who are some of the employers that I might want to learn more about, right? Employers do pay money to come to the fairs, and so they want to have engaging conversations with students. So the more prepared you can be, the more engaging conversation they have, right? Um, it's also important to keep in mind that having these conversations now with employers may mean that they will be more likely to recruit on campus in the future, when you might be in the middle of job hunting, right? If you want to learn more about a specific company or employer, you can ask questions during the career fair. There is information on their website, but that is limited, right? There's always more information that you can learn during a conversation with a representative from that company. If you happen to feel that your professional background and skills may not be a good match, well, having some of these conversations may actually show you and help you determine that you are a good match for future roles, and you can ask questions. So it's really important to think about the benefit of the career fair as a whole. And if you want to actually apply for a role or opportunity at that particular company or organization, you can take that information that you have learned and that you have acquired from the career fair during your conversations, and then submit a better version of your resume, right? Submit, thinking about what do you want to include on your resume, and then submit your resume, showcasing particular skills that might have been talked about. Where did you demonstrate collaboration? Where did you demonstrate some of the modeling, for example, right? Those are all different things to think about. And so crafting that resume can be really helpful moving forward after you've had some of this information from the career fair. After the career fair, after you've participated in it, you can then, as I mentioned, think about what are some of the skills that you may want to further cultivate or further develop while you are a student. Thinking about how you can write a better resume targeted to employers. You can also maybe mention some of the people that you've spoken with at the career fair in a cover letter if you're asked to write a cover letter. And also, if you're invited to interview, you can also mention that experience as well, that you had a conversation with a particular individual. You can also follow up with alumni from Penn, from Weitzman, for informational interviews. And informational interviews are a great opportunity to not only learn more about that particular career path of the individual, but also to learn about what it's like to work at that particular employer. And then you can also take the information that you've acquired at the career fair and identify next steps for future networking. So this is a slide showing our career guide for graduate students and postdocs on informational interviews. So thinking about what are some of the key questions that you might want to ask during an informational interview can help you then write the resume, right? So here are some questions, for example. How did you know that that role was a great fit for you? And what aspects work particularly well in this role of your personality? What are some of the skills that are the most valuable? What are some of the situations where you get to use your best skills? As a professional in this field, what are some of the knowledge areas that you would still like to gain and further develop if they had the opportunity to do so? What are some of the key challenges that might be faced in that particular role? And what's a good example of how the approach that they've taken to overcome that? You can also maybe ask what has been one of their most engaging projects in their current role, and what stood out about that experience, what was significant, what are they the most proud of in terms of that project? So thinking about some questions that you might consider asking at career fairs, this will help you in your preparation. So as I mentioned earlier, researching the employers that are planning to participate and attend the fairs is really important, because then you're able to, go on their website and take a look at what are some of the projects that have been highlighted, what are some examples that they've shown and talked about on there. And then that might lead you to the question at the career fair of, after having looked at the website, you saw that the firm or organization is involved in certain types of projects and work. Can you tell me a little bit more about this particular project, right? You might also, after having seen the job posting or internship posting on Handshake, reference and say what one of the skills was included and what are some of the things that they would like to look for in a resume that demonstrates this in terms of someone's background professionally, or from academic coursework. In terms of internships, when they're normally posted, what would be the best way to apply for these? You can also ask questions more specifically about, what are some of the roles for someone who might have a more advanced degree, and, learning more about what are some of the things that they're looking for. Perhaps you're attending the fair and not yet getting ready to apply for jobs or internships, but you just want to make sure that you're preparing yourself to be as strong and good of a candidate as possible. So what advice would you give in terms of the skill set and experiences that you could be gaining now? And then you can also ask them, what other ways do they engage with students at Penn over the course of the academic year? Are they also involved in other ways, maybe with an externship program or other programs that are offered through the school? Keep in mind that talking with people to gather this information will also help you have an opportunity for you to understand what are the skills and experiences that are valued, what's important to that particular employer, to that particular firm, organization. It also allows you to listen to the way that the professionals and representatives in those roles are interested in talking about and why they do what they do and what they do, right? So thinking about what are some of their responsibilities. And that enables you to then write a really good resume, thinking about, okay, what is it that I need to showcase and talk about? And it also helps you to customize it and make it more effective as a document. You really want to remember that a resume should illustrate how those relevant skills are in action, right? So thinking about how do you have these skills and then how is it relevant to the job? So some tips for getting your resume ready now in 3 steps. So the first is creating your resume. We have a design resume guide for students in Weitzman that this link will be provided through the QR code, where we actually provide sample resumes of real Weitzman students who have submitted their resume. We show best practices, tips, suggestions, ways to improve, and it walks you through each section of the document. We also encourage you to have your resume reviewed by career services, and you can do that in a variety of ways. You can schedule an appointment to have a virtual review with a peer career advisor. We also offer same-day advising appointments with a career advisor, and you can schedule also an individual one-on-one session with a career advisor. All 3 of these ways to meet with an advisor can be scheduled on Handshake. So you log on, you click on Career Center, then you click on Appointments, and then schedule a new appointment. You will then click on the resume cover letter review as the appointment type, and then select the type of appointment you would like to schedule. The third thing to get ready now in terms of your resume is to upload your resume to the resume books. They are open. So you may have already seen emails that have gone out about the resume books. You can visit the Design Career Fair's student page where the links are available. We have them organized by full-time and internship. You will scroll down and see not only the type of role, but also the specific field of interest for you. And keeping in mind that employers have access to the books 1 week prior to the fairs. So when you go onto the Design Career Fair student page, you will see the deadline of when to upload your resume book by, and then you will see the links as well for where you would be interested in uploading your resume. You can upload your resume to different books, multiple books rather. So if you're interested in more than one field, that's perfectly fine. Just be mindful whether it says full-time job or internship. So some resources that will be helpful for you. You can scan this QR code to access the resources highlighted in the workshop. It will take you to the PowerPoint slide deck, and from there you will see the hyperlinks as well. So thank you so much for attending the Prepare for the Design Career Fair workshop today. I hope that this has been really informative and helpful as you start to prepare for that. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you on February 6th for the in-person fair, and we look forward to seeing you at the virtual fair the following week on February 12th. Thank you so much.